Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for those of you who are joining us online or watching this after the fact. It's great to have you here at the Chambers, something on the front row. We will clean that up, whatever is going on there. But morning, Ed, great to have you here. We are very lucky and fortunate to have two of our representatives from Oregon Legislature here today, and I'd like to officially welcome Charlie Conrad and Ed Diehl, both who represent unique areas within our state and are of the voting bloc who help determine what occurs across our state each year. As you are aware, a unique time, all of our representatives are currently running for office right now. Representative Conrad is an independent from Northern Lane County, and Representative Diehl represents the Santiam Canyon as well as Northeast Salem and kind of out towards as we head towards Staten and Sublimity. But it is great to have all of you here and get to hear their wisdom. As you're aware, this is being recorded. You can watch this after the fact, and many of our Salem Chamber members some bring kids to school in the morning, and we know that 7 is not ideal in everybody's schedule. We're always glutton for punishment, and we love the early morning meetings. So wonderful to have you all. With that, I believe we are starting out with a video, gentlemen, correct?
Yes, we have. There's one slide that talks about how this arrived on the ballot.
Okay.
And then there's about a 3.5-minute video that we agreed does a pretty good job of explaining ranked choice voting.
One thing that I appreciate, and certainly as a Salem Chamber member would appreciate, is we have two individuals coming to us to talk on ballot measure 17, one on each side, and yet they came together with the same PowerPoint to bring us and a same mutually agreed upon video. Wouldn't that be great if we get that type of consensus building and agreement on both sides of the aisle at all times? So with that, I believe we are going to start with the.
And just as we get going on the video, this is the video from Maine. They're one of the first states to do this. And so there are some things in there that are particular to Maine, but this really does a great job just going through the fundamentals.
If you could do the second slide there, the middle slide. Yeah. So really quick, Measure 117 for ranked choice voting is a House referral. It was not voted on by the legislature. It wasn't an initiative petition that put it on the ballot. It was referred by the House and the Senate. So there's a few points. Ranked choice voting is implemented a little differently depending on where you're at. But for Measure 117, it maintains the existing partisan primary. So we're still going to have a Republican primary, Democrat primary, and so on. Within those primaries, you will have ranked choice voting. And then in the general election, there'll be ranked choice voting. And RCV is only used for the following primary and general election. So president, US Senator, US Congress, governor, secretary of state, treasurer, and attorney general. All other offices, partisan and nonpartisan, will stick with our regular plurality system that we use now. And this video, is there anything else you'd add to that, Charlie? And then this video gives you a rundown of how ranked choice voting works.
Ranked choice voting allows voters to choose candidates in order of preference. The votes are tabulated in rounds until only 2 candidates remain, and one candidate is determined to have received the majority of the votes in the final round. That candidate is then declared the winner. Here's how the tabulation works. Let's assume that there are 4 candidates for the United States Senate. Let's say that blue is your first choice, the person you would most like to see win for that elected office. Yellow is your second choice, and if neither of them can win, you'd rather see purple in that office before orange. So you rank purple third and orange fourth. You are not required to choose more than one candidate if you do not want to participate in ranking. Your first choice candidate for that office will be counted on election night. If no candidate receives a majority, the voting will move into ranked choice voting rounds. All of the ballots and tabulator memory devices will be transported by courier to a secure location in Augusta for counting. Let's take a look at how all those votes will be tabulated. On election night, none of our candidates got a majority of the votes. So we move into round 1 of the ranked choice process. Orange received the fewest votes, so it will be eliminated from the race. But the people who voted for Orange as their first choice will still have a voice. Their second choice candidate will be revealed, and their vote will go to that candidate. In our example, 3 of the people who voted for Orange chose Blue as their second choice. So Blue receives 3 more votes in round 1, bringing its total to 11. The other 2 people who voted for Orange chose Purple as their second choice, so Purple receives 2 more votes in round 1, bringing its total to 9. Yellow's votes are also moved into this round. The round 1 totals are Blue 11, Yellow 10, Purple 9. Now we're on to round 2. Purple is eliminated, but Purple voters still have a voice in round 2. Those 7 people who voted for Purple as their first choice will have their second choice revealed. Of those 7 voters, 4 voted for Orange and 3 voted for Blue. Orange is no longer in the race, so those ballots are exhausted and are removed from the count, since these voters did not rank any other candidates. The 3 votes for Blue are added to the total for Blue, bringing Blue's total to 14. Now we look at those 2 votes that Purple received when Orange was eliminated. These voters chose Orange first and Purple second. Now we look at their third choice. These voters chose Yellow as their third choice, so their votes go to Yellow. Yellow now has 12 votes and Blue has 14. Thus, in round 3, the votes for Blue and Yellow move forward. With only 2 candidates remaining, Blue has the majority. Blue is named the winner of the election. Here are a few things to keep in mind when you're marking your ranked choice ballot. If you vote for more than one candidate in a single ranking, your vote won't count since we won't be able to tell which candidate you really want. If you decide to skip a ranking, your choice will be bumped up to the previous ranking. In this example, the skipped ranking will be ignored and Spider-Man will be counted as your second choice. If you decide to skip 2 or more rankings, though, we'll only count the votes before the double skipped rankings. If you only want to vote for one candidate, you can do so. If you choose the same candidate in multiple rankings, only your first choice vote will be counted and will carry forward into subsequent rounds, so this is the same as a single first choice vote. Determining the winner of each election will take a while, given the size of the great state of Maine, but we'll report the unofficial results as soon as they are ready so you'll know who has been chosen for each elected office.
Okay, we received a preface of how this would work based on the main video. We'd like to start with our proponents who brought this forward. So Representative Conrad, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I'll just touch on a couple quick things from my perspective and why I'm sitting here on the proponent side, the yes side for this measure. I voted for it on the floor because it was a referral to the people. This is something when we talk about our systems and our election systems, it doesn't need to be voted on by the legislature. So I supported it going out to the people. And I supported it because at that point in time, we had a year and a half to do events like we are doing today, which is to have conversations, that put it in the public discourse and see if this is what we want to do as a state of Oregon, if this is the right move for us. Had we voted on it at that date and that time, whether to go for it or not just a referral, but whether we wanted ranked choice voting, I probably would have been a no because I didn't know enough about it. Recently, as I've gotten more involved into this area, in this space, I've been switched to this is what we need. I am a firm advocate for ranked choice voting. There are a number of election reforms out there. This to me is the best one that we have, the best option that we have. It's in over 50 different jurisdictions, a couple states. Australia's been doing it for a long time. It's been around in the US for years or so in various forms. Non-government entities like football, your awards, they do this thing. This is how you figure out, who's going to be the Heisman Trophy winner. So it is not a mystery of how this works. And it's not a mystery how to make this work. There are a number of different flavors for ranked choice voting. There are different things you can do. It is a human creation to manage us and to figure out how we're going to run our government. It's not going to be perfect. There are ways that we can mitigate some of the impacts, and Rep. Diehl and I will talk about that because this is some of where we disagree on some of the points of that. But there are ways to mitigate a lot of this. And so looking before us now with Measure 117, is this something we want to do? There are some aspects to 117 that I would prefer would be a little bit different. I want the state legislature involved, but that's not in 117. So this is dipping our toe in the water to get it out there, to get it to work. Again, Benton County's been doing it for a while. Portland's already gonna be doing it up here. We'll see how it works for them. But getting our county clerks involved, getting the technology there, getting it going, we need to do this. But this in and of itself, to me, is not enough of what we need to do with our elections reform. One of the things that I am personally involved in and that I care about is the fact that we pull some of the power back from parties and we give it to the people. The parties right now are surrogates for the people. They give us the children's menu of choice. Republican, we have a Democrat. And a lot of the times, it doesn't matter who you vote for. If you're in an R district, the Republican's going to win. If you're in a D district, the Democrat's going to win. There are very few contested races throughout Oregon. This is one way we can do it. We can have a system, we can have a structure, but it's not going to make it work because we as voters have to take advantage of the opportunity it provides. We can still all be partisan. We can still all vote R or D and nothing changes, right? We're still going to be a plurality system. This gives us the opportunity to do something different. But in and of itself, the other election reform things that I want to see happen, I want to go with the Alaska model. I want to go with blanket open primaries. I want all of us to be on a primary, top 4, top 5, move on to a ranked choice voting general election. The other thing that I advocate for and that I want is that for us to have independent redistricting commissions. These 3 things will put us in a much better spot where we're at today. It gives us opportunities. In and of itself, it won't make it happen. We as voters have to choose to take advantage of these opportunities that it provides. And I'm sure we'll get into the details a lot more how it works. That was a pretty good video. So at this point in time, I'll turn it over to Ed for some opening remarks.
Great, Ed. Thank you.
All right,
In
so
opposition.
here's what I look for. Well, first off, thank you for this opportunity. But here's what I look for in any election system that we have. It's got to be easy to vote, easy and understandable. It's got to be accessible to every voter, regardless of your age, race, income, disability, or education. It's got to be secure. And I believe that also means controlled locally. It's got to make it easy to count. It's got to be transparent and easy to audit. It should be cost effective, and it should deliver predictable, timely, and understandable results. And I think any election reform we do needs to live up to its hype. And the thing is, ranked choice voting is envisioned by Measure 117, doesn't do any of the things I just said. It makes them worse, and it doesn't live up to its own hype. You're going to hear where ranked choice voting leads to a majority vote. And I'd like to talk more about that, but we saw right there, it does not lead to a majority vote as you and I would think of a majority. It leads to a majority of people left at the last round. That's not a majority of voters necessarily. It doesn't eliminate the spoiler effect. That's one of the things that's been touted with ranked choice voting is eliminates the spoiler effect. You know what I mean by that? Where you have a Betsy Johnson and people are agonizing, gosh, I really like Betsy, but do I vote for Betsy because that'll spoil my preferred candidate's chances? So it sways your vote. Well, that is a problem with our system. Ranked choice voting doesn't solve that. We saw it complicates the voting process. And there's plenty of data out there that shows that people in certain demographics make more mistakes as a result of ranked choice voting. And as a result, it disenfranchises certain groups, low-income voters, seniors, people with less education. I hate to say it, but the data shows in Minneapolis and New York and other locations, they make more mistakes. They make more mistakes with ranked choice voting. And when you make a mistake, your vote is not being counted. It leads to unintended and undesirable results, wonky results. We can talk about that more as we go along here. It reduces transparency. If you saw through that process, Maine takes all their ballots and puts them in couriers and sends them to one location. The counties aren't counting those ballots anymore. Now in Oregon, I don't think we're going to put them on trucks and send them to Salem. I think we're going to do some kind of electronic transfer of the vote cast records, send them to one central location. But we're taking control away from the counties. We have to change existing state law that says we have to count them at a precinct level. Can't do that with ranked choice voting. It increases the cost, and we haven't even identified what that cost increase is yet. And I believe because of some of the wonkiness and how, in some of the scenarios of how votes are tallied and counted in the round process, it violates the equal protection clause in our own Constitution, Article 1, Section 20. Because in some scenarios, people's choices are not considered. So I'm not opposed to changing our election system. Although I think our current one, despite its flaws, has worked pretty darn well. We have an amazing country, prosperous, wealthy, the most diverse country in the world, despite the flaws in our election system. But if we're going to change it, we better make darn sure that it is better than what we have, that it doesn't introduce more harm than good. And the evidence is just not there. For every positive study that the ranked choice voting advocates can display, I can show you 1, 2, or 3 that show that it fails. It introduces more harm. So I don't understand why we would go this route when we know that it produces unintended consequences and people don't care for it as much. 85 US jurisdictions have tried ranked choice voting and repealed it. And it's not new. It's been around in its current form for maybe 100 years. This isn't a new idea. It's been tried and repealed. So with that, I'll leave it. We can get into more of that later.
Thank you both for your opening comments. I have a number of questions, and I'd like it if we could just go back and forth. And if I start with Representative Conrad, we'll start the next question with Representative Diehl, certainly in format. Both. Representative Conrad, let's start at the beginning. Could you introduce and help us understand at a base level, what is the problem solving by bringing in ranked choice voting?
Yeah, and Rep. Diehl mentioned some of it as well with our plurality voting system. It is in the way that the parties have become more sophisticated. They can influence voters, they can influence the system. The politics industry is very complex, it is very robust, and they are self-serving and self-interested because they're made by us and we're all self-serving and self-interested. What that has done is that has pulled us further apart. So as I mentioned before, parties are now the surrogates for voters. If you as a voter want to vote party, do that, that's your choice. But parties right now are controlling that system and they're taking the power away from us. When the system that we currently have now, the plurality voting system, all you have to do is get more votes than somebody else. You don't have to have the majority. And a lot of what has happened in some of our jurisdictions and districts, and each one is very different. Each county is very different. But when you've got a minority of folks that are a significant minority of folks that, may get split across a broader spectrum, and then you've got a certain number of folks that are enough to carry an election. Those folks that can carry an election are going to carry that election to the detriment of all those other folks that aren't going to be represented. So again, this is an opportunity to fix that problem so that people have a voice and that the person that gets elected actually represents that district better. There is a spectrum out there, and there's, a lot of the folks that are opposed generally come from the Republican side, but the Democratic Party also opposes. The folks that I categorize broadly, you probably find some individual differences, are generally going to be more party aligned entities as opposed to pro-government, pro-democracy type entities. Now you can find me, that's just for me, the way that I categorize as I go through and I read the reports, I read the research from both sides of it. You get more of the party aligned folks are going to be opposed to it on both sides of the spectrum because they want the parties to maintain control. I want the control back to go to the people. And I want people in their district to have a voice that matters and for their vote that actually matters. And we'll get into probably some more of the details because some of what Rep. Diehl said, I agree with. There are reports on both sides. Elections are complex. Candidates come into play. You have all the money that comes into play. You have the advocacy, you have the issues, you've got district history. You have all these factors that come into play. And that's why, to me, you get a wide array of studies. But when you look at what the system can do, it provides that opportunity for people to actually be represented. And for, if you have 3 people running, you can win with 40% of the vote. You can win with 34% of the vote. Is that really representative of that district? No, we need better representation. That's the problem that we're solving.
Thank you, Representative Conrad.
Can I respond to that or?
Please.
Okay, so that's a noble goal, but ranked choice voting doesn't do that. As we saw in the Maine example, the winner didn't have a majority. New York recently elected a mayor through ranked choice voting. He was the 4th place finisher, I think, on the first tally. He's now mayor. He's being indicted, by the way. Don't know if that's related to any of this, but by the time that election made it to the final round, 15% of the ballots, or 140,000 ballots, were what's called exhausted. So as the main example, they didn't vote into the later rounds, or their chosen candidate was not represented in the later rounds. They were eliminated, or they had errors on their ballot. So I don't agree with that. We're going to end up with a majority vote with this. In fact, the original ballot title, some people objected to that and took it to court because it just said it was a majority, and they had to change it. It's a majority in the final round. Now, I don't think people understand what they're reading when they read that. I'm trying to explain it to you that if 100 people vote and 20 votes are exhausted before the final round, a majority in ranked choice voting is 41 votes, not 51 votes. That's not a majority by any definition I would use, but it's a majority the way ranked choice voting works. The other thing that Charlie mentioned, I think, is that it leads to more moderate, you might get some more moderate independent like Charlie here. Winners. I haven't really seen any solid evidence to that, but I have seen some evidence where this can be used to actually elect more extreme candidates. And I'll give you a scenario. And if you go to Diehl.com and you look at my most recent newsletter, I talk about this. But through the process of ranking, you can end up in a scenario where a candidate beats another candidate in a head-to-head competition. The majority of people prefer, say, candidate B over candidate C in a majority or in a head-to-head competition. However, because of the elimination rounds, that candidate eliminated in the first round. And the people that chose him second, their voice isn't heard. So candidate C wins that. It's hard to explain, but in my write-up, it shows you. This is a common, or it's a well-known issue with ranked choice voting. And so there's a certain group of people under those scenarios that don't have their voice heard. And you go, well, how often does that happen? Is that really a risk? Well, let me ask you this. Who is backing ranked choice voting in Oregon? One of the main proponents of it is Blair from Corvallis, Blair Bovier. He's a Green Party candidate. He's not a middle of the road candidate or a Green Party member, a leading advocate with the Green Party. We have Democrat socialists that are in favor of this. The big money, hundreds of millions of dollars across the country supporting ranked choice voting are not middle of the road people. They are extreme left activists. Why in the world would they support something that brings voters to the middle? That's because that's not their goal. I don't believe that's their goal. I think they know that there are flaws in this, and they know they can exploit those flaws, money. And they're dumping money into Oregon. You'll hear this is a grassroots effort. Well, last week, $1 million of grassroots money was dumped into Yes on 117. And I don't know where it came from because it's running through a C4 that we can't see where the funds are coming from. It's upwards about $2 million that have been dumped into Yes on 117. The bulk of that, we can't tell where it's coming from. 200,000 of it came from Washington, D.C., we know, but the bulk of it's being funneled through a C4, we can't see it. We do know that Arabella Partners a great big activist nonprofit or that has assets of, I think, over $1 billion. They're dumping money into ranked choice voting all around the country. There's a grassroots effort to repeal ranked choice voting in Alaska. And they're putting millions of dollars into Alaska to fight the grassroots repeal effort. That is a real grassroots repeal effort. I know the guy who's running that repeal effort. So the fact that it's these far left groups that are funding this just really, to me, discredits the idea that this is going to bring us more moderate electorate, more moderate candidates.
So
Can I reply to a lot of it?
Yes, and I'm Representative Conrad, I think I'm going to get you up here. So one of my next questions.
Perfect.
And I believe we've now heard Senator Diehl's answer on that.
Senator.
Oh, I got promoted.
Nicely done. I am impressed.
Pardon, Representative Diehl.
Jeez,
I did give you
that's a good answer.
All due respect to our local senators, Patterson and Patrick, if you're watching, no disrespect. As Representative Diehl dove into the topic of funding, Representative Conrad, would you clarify who is funding this effort, sir?
I will talk broadly about it because, there are a number of groups that support it. The folks that I have talked to that support ranked choice voting or support it throughout the country, just like any advocacy group. And again, it gets back to the system. The issues that we face in Oregon are not as extreme as some other states. Idaho also has this. Idaho has a measure, I think it's a Prop 1, that's looking at the Alaska model, where they're actually going to tie in the blanket open primaries in with ranked choice voting in the generals, with the top 4 coming out of the primary. So there are other states that are battling extremism more than what we have. I don't want Oregon to get to that point. I want us to stay in a better, more functional spot. And some of the groups that Rep. Diehl mentioned, there is a lot of money from various groups coming into it. I don't know the bank accounts. I don't know how much. But it's just not, as Rep. Diehl said, the far left. There are think tank organizations, so center right organizations that support it. Cato Institute, American Enterprise Institute, and also R Street, center right think tanks all support it. They are not party aligned. The folks that are party aligned that oppose it are going to be Heritage Foundation and ALEC. Those organizations oppose ranked choice voting. So it is those again, that's where I get to my point of the opposition are party aligned entities on both sides of the spectrum. A clarification for one of the points, this can moderate our elections. It can moderate the candidates and who gets elected, but only if that's what we want. What ranked choice voting really turns out on the back end is somebody that represents the district more. So if you have a district that is going to be more extreme or lean more to one party or the other, that is the candidate that's going to be more likely to win. So it can moderate it, but it picks, and the outcome is likely to be somebody that really represents that district more. Alaska, Rep. Diehl brought up the Alaska. Alaska is one of the typical case studies for this. In the same ranked choice voting election, they chose a Democrat state representative, Mary Peltola. They chose a moderate Republican senator, Lisa Murkowski, and a very conservative governor, Dunleavy. Same ranked choice system, 3 completely different candidates because they represent. And again, our elections are so complex with the voter behavior as well as the entities, the people running themselves. So one of the things that Rep. Diehl mentioned comes to, what did you mention that I was going to talk about? I just lost it. It's the candidates themselves really come out. And it's important that they get represented, they represent that district. And so again, this is that opportunity, but it's only an opportunity if we take advantage of that. The other, yes, and the funding, I don't know. I was not involved in the conversations at the get-go of this. Ranked choice voting first came before the legislature in 21, which predated me. And I don't know all the background. I think Ed gets more into the funding behind it. I look at the words on the paper. What do the words on the paper say to me? And what makes sense to me? And do I understand it? And do I understand how that fits into our plurality system? That's the important part of it for me.
Great. I can see with timing, because we do want to wrap up in 15 minutes to allow our group to have some discussion. I'm going to need to jump around a little bit and prioritize questions. Both of you gentlemen have used the term election reform. To create a baseline of understanding of, and help us maybe understand why this is something critical that we look at, could you best describe in your vision how perfect voter reform would look in the state of Oregon if this is not the model that you believe to be the best model? And Representative Conrad, we'll start with you as you.
I just spoke a lot.
Okay.
Rep Deal's only answered once. You want to go first, Ed? You want me to? I'm good with your
Oh,
option.
doesn't matter to me. I mean, I'm fine.
Very congenial. Thank you,
Yeah.
gentlemen. Then we will start with Rep Diehl. Again, the question addressing what does perfect voter reform look like if this is not the model?
Well, I don't know if I have an answer for what perfect is. There is no perfect system. If you talk to election scientists, and so I've gone down the ranked choice voting rabbit hole, I have. Every system has strengths and weaknesses. You're just trying to pick one that works. And there are some other systems out there. I would say, the ideal system is, it would be nice if you could vote for someone without the spoiler effect. That would be a nice thing. So that's what leads a lot of the election scientists to pursue a better system. And there's a lot of systems out there. Ranked choice voting just happens to be one that people have grabbed onto. And I think for reasons that are less than sincere, being funded heavily and being pushed. But I don't know what the ideal is. Again, I go back to, I am not ready to change something that has built an amazing country without really good evidence that it's better. And if we do find something that's better, let's test it out. Let's try it in a small town somewhere. Let's run it through the paces before going statewide. Which brings me to another point with ranked choice voting. Why now? Why now? Why are we doing this statewide? Portland is just going to run their first ranked choice voting election for city council and mayor this election cycle. Why don't we let Portland give this thing a test run and see how it works, see what their voters think of it, take that feedback, get feedback from our clerks, and learn from that and move forward. Why rush into this right now?
Representative Conrad.
To pick up on Rep Deal's last point, Benton County and Corvallis have been doing this for a while. Again, 50 jurisdictions in the country have been doing this for a while. It's not new. It's been around. And as more jurisdictions are doing this, and depending, I think there are 5 or 6 states that you might know more specifically that are looking at this cycle. There are 10 states in the country that have banned it. And all those are GOP oriented states, Alabama, all the southern states. So there's some, and a lot of that misinformation is out there. Some of the things that were brought up is the minorities. There are a lot of minority representative groups that have signed on and support Measure 117. Minorities have been found that that they see people like themselves more often because you have more candidates in there, and that minority candidates are more likely to get additional votes in second and third round. So there are some benefits to this. Other cities like Salt Lake City, they've got the most diverse city council under ranked choice voting that they've ever had, where they have the majority of the city council are minority members and a good portion of them are LGBTQ. So there are ways that this works. Again, we are complex. We are not perfectly rational individuals, and we make choices based off of our passions more than our logic at times. And this is something that makes this whole system complex and our voting choices more complex. And that comes into the exhausted ballot side, which has come up. And there are a number of ways that a ballot can be exhausted. And Rep Deal's explanation of the majority is accurate. It's the majority of ballots that are counted in that last round. If under the ideal system, we have, just say simple math, we have 4 candidates on a ballot. If all of us go pick 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is easy, the mechanics of it are easy. Most of us probably have all taken Scantrons. And we make choices every day in our lives that we're going to rank. What are we going to do? This, and then this, and then this, right? So the mechanics of voting are not that complex. It's fairly straightforward. The decision-making processes that we all go through a little bit more complex because we are going to have to choose who do we want and in what order do we want. If you get a very complex ballot, like, 12, 15 people, no, what's the difference between 12 and 13 in that effort? So smaller ballots are a way, again, to mitigate some of the negative impacts of that we can do. And the exhausted ballot side, we hit it now. If we have overvotes and undervotes, an overvote is if you vote for too many people for the same seat. Undervote is if you don't vote for somebody. I mean, a lot of us, might not vote for a circuit court judge because you just don't know. So you're just going to bow out. A lot of the same things that happen in ranked choice voting also happen now. That's why we have names for them. Ideally, if everybody voted for every single candidate, every single ballot would be counted in that last round and you'd get that true majority. Not. Some R's are never going to color circle next to a D, and some D's are never going to do it next to an R. They just can't, and they refuse. So you're always going to have some of those where that last round is going to be less than the number in that first round. And that's just a function of life. It doesn't have to be that way, but as humans, that's just going to be the function of life.
I have 2 important questions we need to get to,
Yeah.
and we're running out of time, but I'm a numbers guy, and I think I want to repeat what I heard and then have you clarify if I'm incorrect for both of you. Representative Conrad, you just said there's over 50 jurisdictions who have embarked on this, correct?
Correct, including Benton County.
And then, but Senator Diehl, you started by saying 85 jurisdictions have repealed
Yes,
this.
yes. So
So there's 135 that have totally done this now, but 85 of them have pulled off.
I can answer to some, and then Ed, I don't know all 85 where that number's coming from, but Utah recently did a pilot program where they had 21 cities sign up for that pilot program. 10 backed out of that. And those 10 is because of the Republican Party in Utah and the way that their political system is working. So you have some that kept it, but you have a significant number, 10 of that original 21 that have since said, no, we're not going to be running with this pilot program. I don't know if that's 10's included in your 85 or not, Ed.
no, the number I have, so we've been doing this. We've attempted to do ranked choice voting. And we need to clarify something too. When we say we're throwing around the term ranked choice voting, it's ranked choice with instant runoff. In some parts of the world, they call it instant runoff. We abbreviate it, call it ranked choice voting. Some people will protest. Well, it's really instant runoff. But in the way we are describing it here, it's been tried for 100 years in the United States, and it's been rejected at least 85 times. And once Alaska repeals it, it'll be 86.
Okay, so for clarity, it's been tried and failed maybe, but
Yes.
not instituted 85 times and repealed.
No, it was instituted. And here's the typical scenario. Let's take, you'll implement it. It's been running in Benton County for, I think, since 2020. They've only had one election in 2022 where it went past the first tally, when it had to go into an additional round. And it was for city councilor and I think a mayor. And it went one additional round. They have not stress tested the system. They have not experienced the scenarios that I'm talking about, where you end up with somebody that would lose in a head-to-head competition with his opponents, but still wins the voting, like Burlington, Vermont has experienced. And I would argue like Alaska experienced with Patola. Baggage would have won that head-to-head with Patola, head-to-head with Palin. But because Republicans in 120,000 Republicans to 70-some thousand Democrats, the Republicans split their vote between Palin and Baggage. They didn't fill out their final rankings, and Patola won that election. And people are baffled that they don't understand it.
So,
yeah.
For the sake of time, I
Sorry.
see Representative Conrad shaking his head there. I want to hear the retort of it.
The Alaska is for the folks that are opposed to it, is the case model of why it doesn't work. To me, it's the case model of why it does. Patola was ahead in every single round. She had over 48% of the vote in the first round. There was a four-way, Democrat, two Republicans, a Libertarian. Libertarian finished fourth. Split ballots. Libertarian had some of their second choice votes go to other candidates. Begich finished third, split ballots. Republicans or people voted for Republican as their first choice, Democrat as their second choice. That's why it works. You can split your ballots. You're not forced just to go party. You can go multiple parties. You can actually focus on people and the issues and the policies.
So I got to respond to that because what's going on right now in Alaska, Patola's up for re-election. And the Democratic Party is suing because there's another Democrat on that ballot. There's a second Democrat on that ballot. And the Democrat Party is suing to get that person off the ballot because they saw what happened in the first time with two Republicans and one Democrat. Republicans split their vote, the Democrat won. So in this case, all the Republicans pulled themselves off except for one. And there's one gentleman who's on the ballot as a Democrat, and the suit says his presence on the ballot as a purported Democrat would force the Alaska Democratic Party to associate with him against his will and would confuse voters, making it more difficult for a plaintiff to turn out voters and support. His presence on the ballot will divert votes away from Congresswoman Patola and raise the risk that this other person might cast their ballots. The Democrats who supposedly support ranked choice voting are arguing in court that it's too complicated and it will divert votes away from their preferred candidate.
Point well taken. I have got to get through a couple more, and I have managed your time poorly.
No, we didn't help you at all. We don't help.
So a very important thing for us, two important questions that need to be asked, if you could, as succinctly as possible.
Yes.
With the challenges already that Oregon faces with voter turnout, do you feel this new complication of the model will potentially dissuade voter participation or encourage voter participation? Representative Conrad, the floor is yours.
I won't go with the complication. I'll go, it provides the opportunity, and it might take a couple iterations for that exhausted majority of folks that have bowed out of voting to see the benefits and to take advantage of those benefits. Eventually, yes, it provides that opportunity if we take advantage.
And I would say no. It's reducing transparency. Did you know what Portland's implementing? There's no actually agreed upon way to audit the results of how Portland's doing it. There is a method to audit what we're proposing, or what's being proposed in Measure 117, but it is leading edge, even according to the ranked choice voting advocates. So I would say no, it's going to reduce transparency. It complicates the process. People are already skeptical of our election system. Why radically change it? We're just going to introduce more reasons for people to say, I don't trust the system.
Good. And very quickly, nobody has touched on new costs to the system. Senator, Representative Diehl, I'm going to say that Senator, I'm doing Senator Conrad next, so
I'll be governor before that.
Diehl, quickly, your belief on the cost and what this will do for municipalities who are not prepared for this voting system.
Well, we don't have a cost, so it is an unknown. And one of the advantages, I think, of our current election system is every county does things a little bit differently. They have different computer systems. They have different ballots. They have different internal processes. This will force us to consolidate. So all the systems in every county will have to upgrade. There'll probably be a lot of pressure to upgrade to the same system. It's all going to cost money. Every county, I don't know how many ballots your county produces. Marion County has 340 different versions of ballots. Every one of those has to be tested and audited, and they're going to have to reinvent how they do that.
The cost estimate that I always hear is $5 to $8 million. And that's, seems to be consistent with the literature that I read with what Alaska did, with what Maine did on their rollouts and how much it costs. It's going to cost $5 to $8 million to have an election system that actually works and benefits the people. The value on the back end is easily worth that $5 to $8 million. Is about the range.
We will close with this. I have seen a number of unions and particular groups sign off on this. One thing I am not seeing signed off on either side is chambers of commerce. If you could close with why a Chamber of Commerce needs to care about this issue for its local membership.
Because the chambers are diverse. You have diverse interests, you have diverse entities, and you clients are diverse. This allows you to have some sort of input on the election system. And because the representatives that get elected out of there can represent the chamber in a much more diverse and a much better way. Again, if it's taken that opportunity. So this is your interest going forward for as you come in and lobby and advocate in the building and in the legislature for support for the rules legislation. You want somebody that you can approach and somebody that you can talk to and that will listen to you. This provides a much better opportunity for that to happen than extreme candidates, which is where we're at now.
Thank you. And Representative Diehl.
Well, I would take what he said and say that's exactly why you don't want to support this. It's because chambers do want free and fair elections. They want elections that they can trust the results. They don't want the opportunity for extremists to be elected, which ranked choice voting can lead to. They want elections that are transparent and understandable and that encourage the more people to vote and vote in an informed way. So I would encourage any chamber to urge a no vote on Measure 117.
Would you join me in thanking our speakers today? Transition into some conversation amongst our membership. Really appreciate both of you traveling, and especially Representative Conrad, quite a distance. We appreciate your time, sir.
Appreciate
that as well. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
A little conversation. If you would give us one moment, everybody hang tight. We'll have some group conversation.
Good morning. I came and spoke to you all a while ago when we were developing our agenda for 2025. And we've done a lot more work on it since then. And so just going to give you sort of a general overview about where we are and the concepts that we have been working on. So you may be aware that OBI recently put out what we're calling the Red Book. It's a competitiveness review of Oregon in comparison to other states. Surprise, surprise, we're not doing well. We are the 48th most business friendly state. New York and New Jersey come after us. We have very few economic development tools to recruit new businesses, to retain existing businesses. We've also seen some really serious problems in terms of the state just not being aware of how many other states are recruiting our businesses and trying to get them to locate in those other states. Arizona has been very busy. Do you have a clicker or should I just? I assume you are all familiar with what OBI does and who we are. Yes? Yes. Mostly? Okay, great. At the moment, we're very busy fighting Measure 118. Generally, we are focused on state policy, state politics. Occasionally, we get involved in local things. Thank you, Salem payroll tax. So we've developed, we focus primarily on regulatory changes that we believe are needed. Can you advance this a little bit? There we go. So one, this is the key message we are trying to explain to legislators. Everything goes back to having successful businesses. That's how you have families that are earning enough money to buy a house and grow their communities and pay taxes, and taxes are how we fund everything we want to do at the state level. So we've been working really hard to explain that to them. So what we're working on primarily is a whole bunch of tax proposals that will give us more incentive tools. But the real focus has been on changes to the regulatory system. If you can advance a bit. Keep going. Yep. One more, I think. These are all of the bad stats that we sadly know. Next one. There we go. So regulatory environment. What we hear from a lot of businesses, so earlier this week, we had our manufacturing tour. And what we hear is that, the tax burden is bad, but the regulatory environment is worse. And there is, they feel like there's no effort on the part of the state or local governments to help businesses succeed and comply with rules. But then just the volume of rulemaking is so intense. If you can advance, keep going. Okay, so this is our agenda in a nutshell. It will have many concepts and bills that we'll be introducing. The sort of key parts are a rulemaking transparency, rulemaking modernization, permitting improvements, and permitting transparency. So on rulemaking, the rulemaking website that exists is impossible to use. And otherwise, you have to go to every individual state agency. Every individual state agency puts their rules in a different place. They do rulemaking in a different way. There's just no way for, somebody who's trying to run a business to also be able to find what they need to know in order to comply with rules or understand what rules are being proposed. So we have the transparency piece. The idea is to put everything in one place, make it easy to navigate, make it so it's intuitive. So if you were just looking, you wanted to know how many rulemakings are happening right now, you could find it. If you wanted to find when the hearing is for a particular rulemaking that you cared about, you would not have to pull up the PDF that is the notice, dig through all the text until you can find the hearing notice. It would just be easy to find. Some people who spend a lot of time with the Oregon legislature and spend a lot of time on their website have said, well, that's what we need, but for rulemaking, where it is open to the public, you can submit comments. So that's the concepts that we are bringing forward. We've had a lot of conversations with people. We feel like there's a lot of support for it. Treasurer Reed is also a fan of that concept. And I know that Representative Bowman, who's the Democratic leader in the House, is also pretty supportive of the idea. So that one, we have high hopes that we're going to get through this session. We do know that it's going to come with a price tag, but that's a conversation for a different day. And then rulemaking modernization is really about requiring agencies to use plain language when they're communicating to the public about rulemaking, and to require that they justify their decisions. So at the federal level, the agencies have to address the comments that they've received and say why they decided to go a different route or alternatives that they considered. So that we were involved in litigation around the climate protection program. That basis of justifying their decision, there's a lot of the DEQ rules align with federal requirements. And they had put in their statute a requirement that is the federal requirement that they have to justify their decision. And that is the basis on which we were successful on our CPP litigation. More on that later, probably. So we think that that is a standard that we should have across all agencies. If you can advance a bit more, keep going. Go more. These are all things I've already told you. You can keep going. Yep. All right. So, and then, so I expect agencies aren't gonna love me very much, but that's okay. There've also been a move in recent years, from some agencies to be really opaque about their processes, to not let people participate, to have limits on how many people can participate, to not let the regulated community participate in the rulemaking process, other than just submitting written comments. So we are, it's just a requirement that you have to involve the regulated community in any process that you're doing. Any process has to have an opportunity for public input before you get to the point where you've got the rulemaking notice. Yesterday I was talking to legislative council, they were drafting this, and they said, and I said, oh, and we need 30 days from the date that they adopt the rule before it goes into, before they can start enforcing it. And they said, well, why? They have to do a notice 30 days ahead of time. And I said, because the rules change dramatically in that time period. Oh, okay. So that's another requirement, is the 30-day delay. We're currently fighting in a rulemaking where the agency sort of decided to create a whole new process for how they approach rulemaking, that is not consistent with the statute or of the past practice. So that is another element to just require much more consistency, require a public facing rulemaking manual. So all of these different pieces to just try and, all of this has the goal of addressing what is the problem that we hear most often, which is that agencies are not interested, the culture in agencies is a problem. And the agencies are not interested in helping businesses. Well, I can't legislate culture, but what I can do is put in a bunch of different process requirements in place so that it's harder for them to abuse the process. And it's easier for us to get a fair shake. So that is our proposal on the regulatory side. Then on the permitting side, we have been so frustrated. I have a member who's been waiting for 7 years for a permit from an agency. I've got under the Clean Air Act, I think only 2 companies have actually successfully made it through the entire process to get a permit. This has been several years that they have been trying to go through the process. And what happens is that they submit their application, they get sort of down the road, and then DEQ decides, no, we want a different study. Not you, or you didn't do all of the analysis we thought you should do. So you go back, start over again, hire a very, very expensive consultant and redo this study. So our proposal is to say, you can't change the process while we're in the middle. Once we've submitted a fully complete application, you can't decide that there are new requirements. And you have to be transparent about what you're going to ask for at the front end. And then the piece that we feel really passionate about is they have to publish how long it's taking them to process permit applications. Because I think if they are embarrassed publicly, they will fix the process. The other thing is to require more public-private partnerships. We've seen in the Lane County area, they have the Lane Regional Air Pollution something is much better at processing applications. It happens way faster than it happens at DEQ. They're not waiting years and years and years. And part of that is because they do have public-private partnerships. So we want to require them to evaluate the possibility of doing a pilot there. I'm feeling really optimistic. Now, come see me mid-February and I may have changed my mind entirely. But at the moment, we're getting a lot of support from, at least in the House, from some Democrats that are very frustrated with agencies and processes they've seen fail, agencies that have ignored legislative intent. I have one of my new favorite legislators who's just real irritated at DEQ and she's ready to go to war. So we're hopeful. So we'll have all of that. We'll also have a number of different fixes. You've heard from us in the past about wanting to fix the ability to give bonuses under the equal pay law. We'll bring that forward again. We'll be bringing forward a fix on manufacturing overtime. So right now, manufacturing overtime, the law prohibits people from working overtime. And that just is ridiculous to us. If people want to choose to work excess hours, we should let them. And then research and development, tax credits and various other changes and modernizations to the tax code. So that's the sort of big picture of what we're working on. There's more details in this PowerPoint, but I know you guys are running low on time, so I wanted to sort of rush through it as best I could.
Thank you, Paloma, for
Yeah.
bringing this forward to us, and we appreciate working in partnership with OBI. First question, past President Sullivan.
So do you, a lot of times these administrators are following the lead of who's elected, so we're way on the left and with unfriendly business candidates, people that work for DEQ, LCDC, they're taking their lead from them and saying, we're gonna be unfriendly and we know we're gonna have the support of the legislature. Do you see that as who's elected as being part of the issue for the?
No, unfortunately. I mean, Governor Kotek has said repeatedly to her agencies, you are going to change the culture. It's going to be more customer focused. Now, I don't think she understands what that means. I think she thinks it means answering the phone. But she has sent the message to them of, you know, putting more emphasis on being helpful to the people who have to comply, and they don't care.
I mean, for finance, Ohio did the full court press
Mhm.
for detail. I think it was kind of a pickup sign.
Yeah.
A lot of elected officials in Oregon, like, can't afford to lose intel, so what's Ohio doing differently?
Tax credits,
Right.
mostly. Yeah, I think we're getting there. It's surprising to me and to OBI generally that more legislators aren't really worried about that. We would expect that to have been a real wake-up call. And there are a lot of them that just fundamentally don't understand how business operates.
Next question. As you think of that, you bring something up, Paloma, that we're in constant education with our elected officials, bringing new city councilors out to the airport. I mean, we are constantly trying to educate our elected officials. What efforts are OBI taking on to help with the very problem you just described, and that is the understanding by our elected officials of the importance of the small business ecosystem here?
So a lot of the effort that we've put in has been in doing studies various research studies in the last year. Also working with the Oregon Common Sense Institute to do research, to have resources to show legislators, here's the actual picture of the state, of what it looks like. So the competitiveness book, we handed that out to every legislator. We've had a lot of conversations about what it actually looks like to run a business or to try and recruit a business. Having a lot more conversations with Business Oregon about the fact that their number 1 goal should be economic development. It should not be 4th on the list, it should be 1st. You know, just talking to them about what it looks like. We've made some progress from previous years. But it's, you know, it's a long slog. We do a lot of presentations when we have our research materials. We just put out an updated manufacturing study. Our hope is to do a presentation during the next legislative days about that. We also do a tax competitiveness study. We did an education study we just released, education funding study. We'll do another one that'll come out in the winter that is focused on the regulatory environment and all of the, so we're working with a big firm out of the East Coast, you know, on that.
Any questions for Paloma? Yes, Ruth.
Yeah.
Regulatory study, are you gonna parse that out with the agencies and all, you know, what spikes are in industry, by industry?
No, it's not really, I mean, there's some particular programs will be focused on of like what that burden looks like. But it won't be agency specific. In my experience, at least in terms of sort of process issues, it's across the board. You know, there are very few agencies that I walk out of a rulemaking process and I say, oh, that went well.
Yes, Ed.
I'd like TJ to weigh in on this too, but DFR seems to have a fairly good process of rulemaking, and they work well with the insurance industry as far as, at least from the agency side of some of the things. So whatever you do, don't screw that up.
Yeah, I won't. I will say, you know, we don't always love the results that we get out of the Department of Consumer and Business Services where DFR is, but their processes do tend to be better. OSHA is often a different animal within that agency. And they did some weird things, but they've also got very professional rulemaking staff that have stuck to the system. They know what it should look like. I will say that I give them credit for at least generally being better on process.
Any last questions for Paloma? Okay, we were right at 8:30. Dan, any questions generated online? Great. Would you join me in thanking Paloma? That two selfless plugs. On Monday, we will be hosting 2 key debates. Our forum speaker series luncheon, 11:30 a.m. at the Salem Convention Center. We will feature our Secretary of State's race, including Tobias Reed and Dennis Linthicum. We will also be featuring a nice softball for you. Mike Erickson versus Andrea Salinas. So hope to certainly have you present for that, and certainly thank you to Shemeka for being our monthly sponsor and the great team at Hagen Hamilton Insurance Solutions for being our forum's presenting sponsor all year long. Secondly, I'd like to make you aware our November program will be quite insightful. We have Chris Eiler coming from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to give an election recap. Our meeting occurs on November 7th, 2 short days after the national election. While we won't have perfect clarity to all election results, Chris will walk us through the federal level of what has occurred in the Senate and Congress, and certainly at the key position nationally. Second of all, we'll have Diehl Wilson here from Pat Council, who will give us the overview of what occurred in the state of Oregon election results. Again, we will have maybe a little bit of muddy waters with some of these tightly contested races, but we should be able to give our group a nice recap. So we want to make sure to invite you to come back a short 3 weeks from today. Thank you all for joining on the special day. This is the second Thursday of the month. As you're aware, we're always on the first Thursday of the month. It's very important to have the two speakers here today. These gentlemen were not available last week, so appreciate them accommodating us and coming in. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Look forward to seeing you all. Thank you.